So hopefully on the camera you can kind of see how the rear suspension is really stiff on this Can-Am ATV. We've got the shocks set to the lowest, softest setting, and it's still pretty stiff. I had the opportunity to ride it myself a little while ago, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on the first initial ride that I took on it compared to the Hondas and the Polarises and the Arctic Cats of the world here in just a little while. But right now I thought I'd go behind him and get a little footage of it. Getting its first dirt on it today, and probably its first scratch before this is all over with. So these independent rear suspension machines like this, you know, it's kind of interesting because in theory they should be a lot more maneuverable and have better articulation and all of that, but because they're so stiff in the rear end, a lot of the times that's not the case. You know, they actually will get pretty tipsy, you know, even compared to like this old design that the Honda uses, like I'm on right now. So, you know, you still have to have some finesse and kind of know what you're doing when you're riding one of those. But having said all of that, the independent suspension does have lots of advantages, and ground clearance being one of them. It'll be real handy in these rock gardens. Yeah, so here's an example of how these tires are not quite as good. See how they just spin? Well, he made it that time. He just tried it a couple other times and didn't even make it. I'm in two-wheel drive, and I'll just walk right up this like it's nothing. Even though I have shorter tires, I have a completely different brand and everything. Watch this. Look at that. So there's definitely a difference between those Carlisle tires that he's got and these Maxxis tires that are on the Rancher. Big difference. I'm not really sure what the difference is exactly, unless it's just rubber compound, because like I said, his tires are taller than mine, but they're not performing as well out here. Very weird. So just for the record, 99.9% of the time he does wear his helmet. I make him wear his helmet, but we were going to just go to the mailbox today, so I didn't make him wear it. And then at the last second we decided to ride this creek. So FYI, we do have helmets and I do make him wear it. It's just this is a one-off situation. But hey, that Can-Am's doing great. He just navigated this little rock garden section beautifully. And honestly, it's safer than that little Honda TRX he used to have. He's starting to really get the hang of it, and I think he's going to love this machine a lot better because it's just so much more capable. All right, so initial impressions of the 2022 Can-Am Outlander 570. I really like it, and I think he really likes it too. He's excited. What little boy, well, I say little boy, what teenage boy wouldn't be excited about a machine like this, right? So like I was saying, I've never really spent a lot of money on him before. This is the first big purchase I made for him, and he deserves it. He's been helping me do some work around the property and stuff, so I think he'll really enjoy this. But I got a chance to ride it a little bit too, and here's what I think about it. First of all, let's talk about the suspension. It's adjustable front and rear. It's independent front and rear. We have it on the softest possible setting right now, and honestly, I think it's still kind of firm. Compared to the Honda Rancher that I bought, the suspension on this is really firm. So I can't imagine dialing it up to one of the firmer settings. I don't know, and I mean, unless, I guess if you were like blasting through sand dunes or something like that, maybe that's what you would want. But for trail riding, absolutely, you want the softest setting you can put them on because it's still kind of firm. Maybe it'll wear in a little bit over time, but you know, it's not bad. It doesn't beat you up. It's not harsh, but it is kind of firm. So I was surprised by that. And like I said, the thing about that is, even with the independent rear suspension being so firm like it is, it still kind of gets tipsy. It doesn't really have the articulation that you would think it would have, you know, compared to something like, say, a buggy or a Jeep or even a big side-by-side. The footprint on an ATV is so small that you really don't get that articulation that you would expect by going with the independent rear. So the advantage to this is going to be that it has more ground clearance. That's the only real advantage. Otherwise, the straight axle setup, like you have on something like a Honda Rancher, for example, that's going to be the way to go for strength, durability. The way this is set up, it rides better. You don't lose any ground clearance. You know, that's something else we need to talk about, is on an independent machine like this, the more weight you apply to the ATV, the less ground clearance you have, right? Because the machine, the whole thing's going to sag as you apply more weight to it, whereas that's not the case on a solid axle machine like that. So there's definitely pros and cons to both. It just depends on what you're after. In terms of power, of course, it's in the break-in period, so we haven't gone full throttle with it yet. But just going half to 3/4 throttle, you can tell it's got a lot of power. It has way more power than the Rancher, of course. And I would say, compared to like the Arctic Cats that I've had before, maybe some of the Polaris machines, I would say this one's a little bit torqueier. And you know, you have to think about it. This is a 650 engine that they've detuned, and they basically call it a 570. But it's actually a 650 V-twin. So you can understand why it's got a lot more torque, and it definitely feels that way. Once we get through the break-in period, we'll open it up a little bit and see what it'll do. But just in my short ride today, I could tell it had a lot more power than that Rancher over there. This thing will get up to 50 miles an hour, no sweat. So power's not an issue. All right, now let's talk about some little things. You can see the throttle here. I want you to pay attention to the angle of the thumb throttle relative to where the handle is. Can you see how the end of that is sort of parallel and close to where the handle is? And the surface of it's a lot fatter too, right? So you don't have to reach out here to get to it. It's right down here where you need it, and it's less fatiguing. Whereas if we go over here to the Honda and look at it, see the angle now? You've got like a pretty serious angle there, and also it's a little bit narrower, so you have to really reach out here. See where my thumb is now? And so you're kind of stretching for the throttle a little bit, and it fatigues you just a little bit more. So little things like that I really appreciate about the Can-Am. Super nice. Now we're still playing around with the menu, but he noticed that you can set the digital power steering sensitivity, which is nice. And there's a lot of features that you can access in here for the machine. The V-twin engine sounds amazing. I mean, this thing has that deep rumble to it in stock form. So any aftermarket exhaust you put on one of these things, it's gonna make it sound awesome. Can't wait to do that. It already sounds pretty good. Now my Rancher came with Maxxis tires. This one came with the Carlisle Trail Wolves. And I will have to say they do great, you know, don't get me wrong, they're a good tire, but they seem to pack up with mud a little bit faster than those Maxxis tires do. But overall, they're really good. They are a 25 inch, which is better than the 24 inch that the Honda Rancher came with. So I do like that. But yeah, overall, I think they're gonna be a good trail tire, just not so good for mud. So as far as the seating position, this Can-Am sits up a lot higher. My leg, my thigh is at a downward angle rather than being up at an even angle. It's kind of at a downward angle, and I'm about 6'3". I'm a pretty tall guy, I guess. And I sit up like really high on this. So I don't know that a short rider is really gonna enjoy this machine. But yeah, it sits up really high, and it kind of has a forward feel to it, like it's trying to push you forward. So you're gonna be resting on your arms a lot trail riding this, whereas like the Honda, you can see how the seat is flat. So when you're sitting on it, you're just kind of sitting almost like you would sit if you were sitting in a chair. You know, it's a more comfortable position. But I don't know, we'll have to trail ride these things for a few hours at a time and see if that's going to be an issue. The seating position is definitely different though. But the seat doesn't feel bad. It's got some good cushioning to it, good firm support. Certainly not a bad seat by any means. You know, so, and like I said, I like how it's so easy to get off here. I mean, they got this set up really nice. You can quickly take the seat off and get to whatever you need to. All in all, it's been a pretty good machine so far. I've only got a little bit of mileage on it. But yeah, I really like it. Lots of power. The digital power steering works great. The steering on this is super sharp, super crisp. There's no play or dead zone in it at all. I mean, you turn the handlebars and it's going to react. So I think it's going to be a sporty and fun machine, and our initial thoughts on it are that we really love it. So you may have just heard the engine fan kick off. This thing will run about 207, 208. It'll get up around 208. There it goes. And usually the engine fan will kick on somewhere around that temperature, and the engine fan runs quite a bit. It's at 210 now. Of course, the engine's turned off. But anyway, so you can feel, of course, I've got short pants on, and I normally wear long pants when I ride, but even so, I've noticed there's a lot of heat. This V-twin engine generates a tremendous amount of heat, and you can feel it rolling out of here right now on both sides. It's burning my legs a little bit. So I was wondering about that, and it's true. The V-twin engine, you got 2 cylinders instead of 1, so yes, it does make a whole lot more engine heat. Something else I've noticed after further trail riding is that the shifter's kind of notchy. This thing is not really all that smooth. Hopefully it'll wear in a little bit over time. I can't really knock it a whole lot because the Polaris 570, the Sportsman 570, is the same way. It doesn't have the same kind of like shifter gates here that you see on the Can-Am, but it's still very notchy and not precise. I've never been a fan of Polaris shifters either. And this one right here is also pretty notchy, and it's kind of annoying. Even on level ground, I have found that sometimes when I go to put it in park, I have to rock the machine to get it to engage park. Kind of, you know, something that worries me. If you're out on the trail and you have to put it in park on an incline, that worries me a little bit. So definitely want to make sure you always set the park brake. But I noticed on the Suzuki King Quad, they've got this figured out, guys. The Suzuki King Quad is smooth as silk. You know, it shifts through every range. I mean, just as smooth as can be. So I think Can-Am and Polaris, you know, they've got a little ways to go on that shifter mechanism. I've noticed that the turning radius is not nearly as good on this. Now, of course, I'm comparing it right now to the Honda Rancher, and I guess you could make the point that it's not really a fair comparison. But the turn radius on this Can-Am is nowhere near as nice as the Honda Rancher. You know, out here in the woods, I've been able with the Rancher to just kind of snake my way in and out of trees, and on this Can-Am I find that I end up having to do a lot of 3-point turns. So the turning radius could be better. Not real happy with the turning radius, but on the other side of the coin, the power steering continues to be really sweet, especially when you engage 4-wheel drive. You know, and so you're kind of tightening up the steering anyway, because you're engaging the front end. If you're in a rock garden or something like this out in a creek and you put the thing in 4-wheel drive, you're going to really appreciate that digital power steering at that point. I don't know how much I have said about it, but the Visco Lock 4-wheel drive system really is kind of nice. It's easy to use right here on the handlebars, and the Rancher doesn't have anything at all in the front end. It's just an open diff. The other machines on the market have optional locking front diffs, so you can have an open diff or a fully locked diff. But the Visco Lock, which I assume comes from the term viscous, I'm guessing that they've got some kind of a fluid coupling in there. It actually works really nice, and I like it because when you turn it on, you're getting full traction from both wheels without all the harsh feedback in the handlebars. So it works great, and it doesn't really affect your handling and your steering like a full locker would, which means you can use it more of the time. So I do like that Visco Lock system on the Can-Am. That's a pretty great idea. Boy, it's a windy day. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this video up because, to be honest, it's kind of dangerous to be down here right now. There's a lot of branches falling out of these trees. So the one final thing I'll mention after my second trail ride is that low range is really low, and that's a good thing. If you're going to be out doing some technical terrain or rock crawling or whatever the case might be, low range is really nice in this machine because it's good and low. The throttle response is the way that you need it to be. It's not real jerky. It's very linear and very smooth. Because when you're riding in the rocks, you're bouncing around, right? And sometimes if you're punching that thumb throttle accidentally, you can get a lot of jerking and it'll kind of throw you around. I haven't really experienced that with this Can-Am. They've got the throttle response dialed in really nicely. And like I said, the low range is sweet on this thing. It has a tremendous amount of engine braking also. So if you're going to be doing some technical riding, this is actually a pretty good machine for that. It's got lots of torque, lots of power, good throttle response. The gearing is really good on it. I've noticed that in high range, it's got a little bit of delay. So if you're in high range and you kind of give it a lot of throttle, it's got, it almost feels like turbo lag in a way. You wait a half of a second, maybe 3/4 of a second, and then it comes on with a rush of power. So that's kind of interesting. They may have programmed that into it on purpose, but in low range, it's definitely a great trail machine. It's set up really nice for that. These Carlisle Trail Wolf tires continue to be a little bit of an issue. I mean, some guys probably love these things, but I'm telling you, most of these machines come with really mild tires from the factory because they expect people to use these things for a wide range of uses. Some people ranch with them, do farm work with them, just use them to get around on the property, and those people don't want an aggressive tire, so that's why they put these milder tires on there. But even so, usually the factory tires will do a pretty good job in wet, nasty conditions, and I can't really say that for these. These seem to slip and slide a lot out here, and I find myself using 4-wheel drive more often with this machine than I do with the Honda or the Polaris 570 I used to have, or the Arctic Cat that I used to have. Simply because these tires just don't seem to hook up very well. But again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm totally trashing them, because I understand that these tires are kind of a compromise, and if you want better, wet, muddy, creek running kind of traction, you can always buy aftermarket tires. So it's not a real big deal, but just wanted to mention that again. So yeah, overall, it's been a really good machine. I mean, I just wanted to point out a few more things that I've noticed. Every time I ride this machine, I learn a few new things about it. So I just wanted to mention that to you. I know there's a lot of guys out there right now, because it's the end of March, spring is coming. A lot of people are out there shopping ATVs, and this might be one that you're looking at. So hopefully these observations that I've been able to share with you, hopefully it's somewhat helpful. But anyway, like I said, it's super windy, and I can hear branches falling out here in the woods around me, which is kind of dangerous. So I'm going to get on out of here. But I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.